Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
My guest this week is Amelia Dunlop, a pioneering force as the Chief Experience Officer at Deloitte Digital. With a commitment to human-centered design and trust building, Amelia's innovative approach transforms organizations by prioritizing empathy and inclusivity for all stakeholders. Amelia is a best-selling author whose insights have graced prestigious publications worldwide, including Harvard Business Review and Wired. Amelia, welcome to Dare to Care in the Workplace.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you today because this book, The 4 Factors of Trust, and trust is so important in the workplace and so overlooked. We have a lot in common and a lot to cover in like 45 minutes, but I want to start with the book you co-authored, and tell me what inspired you to co-author it, write it in the first place. Where did this come from?
I guess I might start by sharing with your listeners a little bit about my background. In my day job, I get to wake up every day thinking about how do we create better experiences for the people we sometimes call customers or employees, but none of us woke up this morning as either a customer or as an employee. We wake up as humans first. With that kind of in mind, we really set out to elevate the human experience. And that was actually the topic of my first book, which is Elevating the Human Experience, 3 Paths to Love and Worth at Work. And in that book, I sometimes get asked the question, is this a personal book? Is this a professional book? And I always just answer yes, because it is both. It's so much of what we do. And so, Kathleen, I think the thing that really led me to co-authoring the book that you're talking about, The 4 Factors of Trust, is just this idea that we can't elevate anyone's experience if we don't trust them. And so we know intuitively as leaders that trust is so important to the experiences that we're creating, both with our customers and with our employees. And so that's why, to continue that journey around elevating the human experience, we kind of went deep into what does it mean to actually build trust. So that's the kind of the backstory on the books.
That's beautiful. And, I find I'm an author as well. And in my book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, we talk about empathy and trust as well. But what do you think happens to people when they get up, they get ready for work, they go into work, whether virtually or in person? Why do we change our behavior? Because as you say, it's the human experience. I'm a woman, you're a woman, we're human, we're having a conversation. Why does the behavior between employer and employee change when we cross the threshold into the workplace? It gets all muddy.
I would agree with you that that the relationships and work can feel different, right? We often put on what the professional mask. And I think one of the things that I explored in my first book was this idea of 3 paths. So there's the ways in which we walk the path alone, right? There's the work that we have to do on ourselves and the internal voice and the internal narrative, sometimes, the inner critic that can tell us that we're not worthy, right? So we might have some work to do to figure out what does it mean for us to love ourselves and to feel worthy when we show up at work, right? So that we can be our best selves. So that's, the first path. And there's all kinds of obstacles that, to that path. Then obviously the second path is what does that mean in relationship to one other person, right? And the way in which a mentor, a boss, a friend can be an ally that can help us feel like we can show up with our whole selves at work or not. There's that with the individual. And then obviously the third path is for all those communities that we are a part of, those concentric circles, which we may not directly meet individuals, but these are the communities that can make us feel safer or less safe from a psychological perspective, such that we can or cannot show up and feel worthy and loved at work.
Well, we all should feel is that we can show up as our authentic selves at work or anywhere in our communities. And you kind of touched upon that imposter syndrome that I think it invades everybody's space, that I shouldn't be, I'm not enough. And I think with the digital age, with all the social media out there, we're also having this comparison crisis where, I look maybe at your social media and go, wow, I'm not doing enough. look at Amelia, I better step up and get my game together. What can you do to help people overcome that, especially employees? Because I think employees are more in the driver's seat than they realize.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, there's sometimes where I like to point out the fact that even the authors of the original term, the imposter syndrome, really kind of point out the fact that it isn't actually a thing. It's not a science. Syndrome makes it sound like it's a scientific or medical, condition, and it's not. But that my own research, there is this idea that it matters to us to feel worthy when we show up at work. But there are many of us for whom that sense of worth, we don't have. And I think I like to reframe it a little bit to say it's not about, do we have the imposter syndrome, but what would it take to feel more worthy in this context? What can I do to help give that to myself? What can I do to surround myself with, the allies and the mentors, and the sponsors to help me feel worthy? And then what might need to change systemically in the community that I'm a part of? And so I'd like to think about it more that way rather than the imposter syndrome.
It's a wonderful clarifying point. We are responsible for feeling worthy for ourselves versus the world doing it to us, but finding community that helps us feel worthy and that creates the spirit around us that yes, we can versus no, we can't. So it's finding those mentors, those educators, those academics, those friends, wherever you go, wherever you spend your time, that lift you up. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I think just like there's this worthiness gap that we can experience, I think there's possible ways in which we can mirror someone else's worth. So I explore the concept of mirrored worth, where it's the coach, it's the boss, it's the mentor who sees a possibility in you that you might not yet see in yourself. And that's a way in which you can kind of grow that feeling of worthiness.
So tell us more about that mirrored concept. I love that.
The way I described it is there's a worth that we can kind of have in ourselves, right? And we all know on any given day it can be lower or it can be higher. And then there's the worth that another can see in ourselves. And again, it can be lower or higher or match our own vision of ourselves. But that mirrored worth is that place where we have someone, and again, typically it can be a coach, a mentor, it can even be a parent who sees that possibility, who sees that worthiness innately in us, and treats us as though we are worthy of that level of love and respect. And then we, as you know, you kind of get what you expect, right? If you expect someone to feel loved and worthy, they will return that.
That's beautiful. So as employers or leaders or mentors or educators, what's the one or two first steps to creating that mirror situation and believing in someone and showing them that? Not in a creepy way. So so there's this, line that we always have to not be creepy at the workplace. So how do we buoy somebody up?
Totally. I mean, I think it's also worth mentioning that we all have, scarce time, right? Scarce time, scarce energy. And I think that's where I acknowledge that we may not have the benefit of the, in-depth 45-minute conversation with every colleague that we might, want to impact or positively. But I also know that I've been impacted very positively by, individuals who I might meet with once a year, right? Or maybe twice a year. And I do think there's the possibility of no matter how long an interaction might be, that you could leave someone better off in it. That's a frame, right? So no matter how long the conversation, can I leave you better off for at the end of it? That's thing one. I'd say thing two is, fundamental human regard, right? We can learn something from anybody, whether we kind of see them as a peer or as we see them as more junior, but I think there's a frame of this is another human from which I can learn and I can potentially contribute to learning. So I think that framing is important. And then I think when we get into the workplace, you get into this idea of allyship. And I remember thinking that, obviously we have friends at work, they're the person that you might be texting while you're listening to this, and they kind of make the days go by faster. We have mentors who are our coaches and who kind of tell us, what can we tweak to do a better job on a presentation or a report. But then there's this whole other category of allyship, which is sponsorship and what it means to be a benefactor. I use those words deliberately because I realize that a sponsor is acting on your behalf. is much more active than the mentor. I think of the mentor as wise words, whereas the sponsor is someone who's going to get in the ring with you, kind of bring you on the journey, bring you to a meeting that you might not have been invited to. They're going to advocate for you when you're not in the room. And I think we as leaders all have a duty to do that. And then when I think about a benefactor, the benefactors in our lives are the ones who are all three, right? So they can be your friend, they can be your mentor and offer some wise words, and they can be in the ring with you as a sponsor. And they're more witnesses to that journey for you over multiple years.
Oh, I love the way you characterize that. And I also love the way you say allyship. You know, the Gallup Q12 for years have been asking this question, do you have a best friend at work? You know, and to a CEO or a business leader, a key leader, they go berserk when you ask that question, like, who cares if they have a best friend at work? We really, you know, Amelia just framed it for you. It's really that allyship, if we want to reframe it. Who cares about me in the workplace? That will be a sponsor, who will be a benefactor, who will be a mentor, or maybe, you know, all three of those things at once. You know, so making sure that we create an environment where we put the human first. Who's one of your benefactors?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I talk about it in the book, Elevating the Human Experience. One of my benefactors, his name is Anthony Stefan. He's currently our Chief Learning Officer at Deloitte. He really exemplified what I just described in terms of giving me an opportunity to take on a new role that others might have said I might not have been ready for, or might have been a kind of a bigger sort of step up. But he really saw the potential in me to take on a role. And then I think there's something important when we do give a person their shot, so to speak. One of the things that he did is you then have to kind of coach and kind of maintain the kind of the support. You can't just kind of put someone in a new role and say, okay, good luck, I believe in you. What he really did as a benefactor was continue to check in with me on kind of the ways that I needed support, the ways that I needed to grow. And I think there's just something about knowing that someone has your back, right? That helps you feel like you can flourish in the workplace. I think your audience will appreciate this. We've talked a lot about caring. I put out a definition in my book about what does it mean for love to be present at work. And I know that it can be a bit provocative, and sometimes people go, "Oh, that's too risky. Like, I don't want to go there." But I did, just some background reading on it, and the fact that in the Greek language, there's 7 different words for the word love to our one in the English language, and actually there's a version called eudaimonia, which means flourishing. And then you kind of like, well, wait a second, we want everyone to feel like they can flourish at work, do their best work, show up and excel and be productive. So why wouldn't we want them to flourish? So for me, that helped me really reconcile with this idea that love is present at work and is something that we should foster. And back to your point about why having a best friend at work is predictive of satisfaction and performance, it's because we want to feel loved at the end of the day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. We also want to matter. We want to matter. And by loving people in those 7 different Greek ways that you define, by loving people, it doesn't have to be the romantic kind of love. It's really saying, I see you. In that movie Avatar, did you see Avatar, by the way? Either one of them?
No.
Oh, well, it's pretty good. But the way they say, I love you, Amelia, is I see you. And that's what you're defining for, a benefactor. Not only do I see your potential, but I'm going to see you through it.
Yes.
I'm going to be there for you, and I'll catch you if you stumble, even if you fall, because I believe in you.
Beautifully put.
So that is key. And, you talk about 4 factors of trust in your 4 Factors of Trust book: humanity, capability, transparency, which I love that one, and reliability. So tell us more about those 4 factors.
As you said, getting into the second book, the 4 Factors of Trust, we essentially did research on what are the most predictive elements of trust. I'll back up and say, we know that trust has been declining across every sector of society in the past 4 decades. And we also know, and I sometimes like to joke, that the world doesn't need another book on trust. What we actually need is a way to build trust. We need a way to predict and measure trust as organizations and as individuals. And so the four factors, and you mentioned them, humanity, transparency, capability, and reliability, really are the predictors of whether or not we're going to have a trusted relationship. What's interesting about it is they are the four factors with it for any different relationship, right? Whether it's a relationship with our customer in the contact center, relationship with an employee on the front lines, relationships of our teams. And so these are the four factors that we can use as leaders to both measure and then predict how trusted we will be and how that will then drive behaviors that we care about.
Which is behaviors that manifest themselves versus policies. It's how we treat each other and behave with one another. And I find the transparency one is the hardest for most people. Have you found that as well? Because I sometimes employers and employees will hide out and not tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth because they feel maybe there might be retaliation or somebody might judge them. And I've noticed that people tend to walk around with invisible disabilities that are happening to them, but we don't share them because, we have to go to work and, show up our best selves and not let anybody see us, weak. So talk about transparency a little bit on both sides of the house. From an employer perspective, how much do I share with my employees so they can lead a great life and make good decisions? And from an employee perspective, should I tell them I'm unhappy? Should I tell them I'm sick? Should I tell them I'm struggling? That humanity piece, because I think the transparency and the humanity go together, because the more humane we are, the more transparent we'll be.
Yeah. Here's the way we think about it. So you kind of putting out the hypothesis of how important transparency is. I would definitely agree. The way it came out in the research is that for most organizations, reliability and capability are table stakes. For example, you and I aren't going to go to eat at a restaurant if the food itself is poor quality or of questionable health and it's going to make us sick. So we're never going to go back to that restaurant. So that's table stakes. To exist, you're going to need to have a certain level of reliability and capability in our economic environment.
And would you add quality to there?
That's what I say. So that's part of the reliability and capability.
Great.
A baseline that needs to be met. You can start to differentiate yourself through the transparency and humanity that you demonstrate, right? So we might want to go back to that restaurant that brought out the birthday candle because we said it was our daughter's birthday, right? So they demonstrated a humanity to us. Or from a transparency perspective, that we know that it's a sort of farm to table and that the animals were humanely slaughtered. The way we think about transparency is, I think a very important part of that is all the relevant context. And that's important, right? Because you want to know maybe that the animal was humanely slaughtered. You don't want to know the name of the pig. So the name of the pig is not relevant. I tell that story because you were asking, well, what does it mean as a leader? How do we personify this transparency in the workplace where there may be sensitive information, there may be information that we're not quite sure how to share. I just have that in my head. Like, I want to be transparent where there's relevant context. And I think similarly as an individual, you're asking, what does it mean to show up? And do I have to kind of tell everyone about the horrible day I've had or the traffic accident I got to? And I think in the same way that I think about for both humanity and transparency, personal boundaries are a necessary part of the conversation when we're going to talk about vulnerability. So I can be vulnerable with you, but there's still such a thing as a healthy personal boundary, all right, about what is truly not relevant for the work context. So as I think about, how I might encourage listeners to kind of take this and think about it, applying it to themselves is, yes, let's show up and demonstrate more humanity with each other and be more transparent in a way that honors healthy boundaries and in a way that offers the relevant context.
I agree. It's the definition of healthy boundaries, right? That might trip somebody up. From my perspective, I might be more transparent than others. And you've touched upon the definition of healthy boundaries. Some of us have more boundaries than others. And speaking of boundaries, let's stop here. But coming up next time on Dare to Care in the Workplace, Amelia Dunlop shares Deloitte's perspective around AI in the workplace.
What does that mean for us to be human with machine? And it goes back to, you won't be surprised, that trust is a really important part of that. What we've realized is just about everyone out there has a use case now that they've kind of spun up with AI. But to get to scale it and to get to adoption really requires that the humans, us, feel really comfortable using it. And that means we need to both measure and use trust to grow that adoption, both with our customers and with our employees.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.